After the flood, each group of Noah's descendants spread out according to their origins by their nations, and from these the nations branched out over the earth. There was a time when everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. As they migrated from the east, they came upon a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, "Let us make mud bricks and harden them." And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky to make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered all over the world." God came down to look at the city and tower that humanity had built, and God said, "If, as one people with one language for all, this is how they have begun to act, then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach. Let us then go down and confound their speech there, so that they shall not understand one another's words." Thus God scattered them from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why the city is called Babel, or Babel, because there God confused the speech of the whole earth, and from there God scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So what we just heard, although it may have taken you a few sentences to figure it out, is the story of the so-called Tower of Babel. 9 verses in the Torah, which for our ancestors served as an explanation for why there are so many different people across the earth who all speak their own languages. Like the earliest parts of the book of Genesis, it provides an origin for the world as it is, while also satiring the Babylonian Empire, which had oppressed the Jewish people. Babel, that's them. That's what we're talking about. The tower was probably a ziggurat. Now, what we read in the story is that God didn't like that a united humanity built a tower to the heavens, and that's why God divided them. What did God not like about it? The story doesn't quite say. What did God fear that humanity might do with the great power that they wielded? What was that tower for? That's what makes this story of confusion so confusing in itself. And so our rabbis, with their own great power, the power of midrash, of expanding the text to find its hidden meaning, they sought to untangle this story. And so tonight, in this very confusing time, I wanted to share a few different midrashim, interpretations or stories, that help us find meaning as we climb our own Tower of Babel. Midrash number 1. A medieval midrashic collection, Sefer HaYashar, also known as the Generations of Adam, seeks to give us more detail on the sins for which the generation of Babel were punished. It reads, "And they had been engaged in building for a very long time, so that they had already built the city, and the tower therein reached an enormous height. And by reason of the very great height, it took a full year to carry upwards the stones and bricks to reach the builders. And thus it was done all the time, some going up and others coming down. And so difficult was the ascension and descension, that when a brick would happen to fall down and break, all would lament and weep over the great loss. But when a person would fall down and be killed, no one would take the least notice of their death. And God took note of all their wicked thoughts." So what lesson do we find in this telling of the story? What is Sefer HaYashar trying to teach us? The people were so obsessed with building, with ascending, with perhaps capturing the heavens for themselves, that they treated human death as a non-issue, while the loss of a single brick was a tragedy. These people barely needed God to confuse them because they were already so confused. One of the first things we learn in Torah is that human beings are made in the image of God, and that therefore human life is incredibly precious. Using human shields and reveling in the loss of any human being, let alone children, speaks to a deep sickness of the soul. Every innocent death is a tragedy anywhere, and we know that even in the chaos and horror of war, our people will, however imperfectly, protect life as best they can. Pikuach nefesh must always be our guiding principle, lest we return to the days of confusion and cruelty. Midrash number 2. Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, known as the Netziv, in his mid-19th century work Ha'amek Davar, offers his take on the sin of the generation that built the Tower of Babel. We read, "Why did the people fear that they would be scattered over the earth unless they built this tower? They were afraid that someone might leave to another land, and it is understood that this was related to the uniformity that was among them. And since the opinions of people are not identical, they feared that people might abandon their philosophy and adopt another. Therefore, they sought to ensure that no one would leave their society, and one who veered from this uniformity among them was judged with burning. And the same words can also be seen as the fact that they would kill whoever did not think like them." For the Netziv, for an entire generation to work in perfect harmony towards one vision is not natural, because disagreement, both in goals and methodology, are a normal part of the human experience. For this to happen, for the entire world to work in unison, our rabbis imagine that there must have been some kind of totalitarian control of individuals and deterrence against having one's own perspectives. Their unity was so fragile that it could not tolerate any dissent. Surely, this is not the way a society should be. Even as we are all made in the image of God, the Talmud teaches that God makes every person with the same mold, and yet they all come out unique. Or, in a teaching that my mom reminded me of the other day, we're all made of the same dough, but we're baked in different ovens. Our teacher, Rabbi Shai Held of the Hadar Institute, puts this nicely when he writes that their sin was that an attempt to root out human individuality is an assault on God. Jewish theology affirms that each and every human being is created in the image of God, and that our uniqueness and individuality are a large part of what God treasures about us. To try to eradicate human uniqueness is to declare war on God's image, and thus to declare war on God. In this case, then, the confusing of languages was God's gift to us to help make for a more vibrant, diverse tapestry of human life, where each individual can think, feel, and be as they choose, even as we work together in community. God loves difference and disagreement. Let us not simply tolerate differences among people, but embrace them, knowing that each unique person brings their own precious wisdom to the world. Midrash number 3. Rabbi Baruch Epstein, in his 1902 commentary, Torah Temimah, offers his opinion on the nature of the original shared language of humankind. He writes, "At that time, each nation did indeed have their own language. But when they began to build the tower, they needed to understand each other. And throughout the world, they agreed amongst themselves that they would speak only Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, since everyone understood it. The confusion of the languages was done by God, causing them to forget the holy tongue. So then each nation spoke only their own particular language, and thus no one understood anyone else, and they stopped building what they had started." Now, while the rabbis tend to agree that Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, is Hebrew, for they envision that God used Hebrew words to create the world, I think there might be something more here. I believe that we speak in the holy tongue when our words heal, help, or bring us closer to the truth. And when that holy speech is heard and understood in the way that it is meant, then we are now in holy conversation. That kind of conversation is a partnership, an agreement that we make between ourselves and the other. And when we hear only what we want to hear, or what we imagine someone is saying, we will surely find ourselves confused once again. Like the builders of the Tower of Babel, we forget how to speak and how to listen to the holy tongue. I'll offer an example. I know I can't be the only one who lost a lot of sleep over the bombing of the Al-Ali Arab hospital in Gaza, just as we've lost sleep over countless nights because of the horrifying events of October 7th. For me, the hardest part was the uncertainty. I spend more time online than I should. I saw information, misinformation, disinformation with no real way to tell the difference, hoping deep in my heart that Israel, the Jewish homeland, was in the right. And now that the expert consensus is shifting in that direction, there are still so many clinging to what they already believed, because it fits their preconceived narrative about our homeland. The way we talk about the hospital and this conflict as a whole matters. And the way that information flows in an age with more information than any of us can handle matters. Words and articles have real, long-lasting geopolitical implications, and more importantly, life and death consequences. It has never been more important that we truly communicate. It has never been more important that we truly hear and feel heard. And there are going to be relationships, important ones, that are harmed by what we hear people say or see them post. And if someone you love posts something that you think is out of line or that you just can't understand where they're coming from, take the conversation offline. Stay out of the comments section. Get them on the phone, get some coffee. Ask them what they mean. Ask them what they feel and share how you feel. Holy conversation rarely happens on the Facebook feed. It happens between people seeking to deepen their wisdom and their relationship. And so, having looked at various readings of this confusing story of Babel, for everything that it teaches us, I think it still leaves us in confusion, because that is simply the world we live in. Human diversity of language, story, feeling, and ideas gives our world so much more life. But we know that when conflict arises, those same differences can lead us to take life as well. Let us never lose sight of the preciousness of human lives, wherever they are. Let us ensure that we make space for each of us to speak in our own voice and to make room for others. And let us have the strength to lessen our impulse to shout down our opponents so that we can sit down in holy conversation. God, let us be the ones to break your ancient curse of Babel so that we can delight once again in our common humanity and revel in our human distinctiveness. Shabbat Shalom.